We are at the District Service Center in Cottage Grove, Minnesota. We would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the land of the Mdewakanton Dakota people. Mdewakanton means dwellers of the Spirit Lake. Our first item on the agenda is our call to order. Roll call, Dana.
Ryan Clark.
Here.
Sharon Van Leer.
Here.
Eric Tessmer is absent. Pat Driscoll.
Here.
Melinda Doles is absent. Sydney Petnaik. Katie Schwartz.
Here. Next item is 2.0, Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 3.0 is approval of our agenda. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Sharon, seconded by Simi. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 4.0 is our workshop items. 4.1 is a next step update, and that will be introduced by Erin McKoy, Director of Special Services.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Erin McKoy, Special Services Director. It happens all the time. I'm very used to it. And tonight I have the pleasure of announcing Nikki Lack, who is going to share with the board some celebrations and some information on our programming for students who are 18 to 22.
Good evening, Board Chair Schwartz, members of the School Board and Executive Cabinet. I am Nikki Locke, Special Services Supervisor and the Administrator of the Next Step program. I'm excited to be here tonight to showcase the great work of the students and staff of the Next Step program. The Next Step Transition Program is a special education program that serves students who have attended one of our traditional, alternative, or online high schools. Our students have completed their high school academics and come to Next Step based on the recommendation of their IEP team due to their continuing needs in the transition areas of post-secondary education and training, employment, and independent living. We have 2 learning communities, Next Step located in Cottage Grove and Pathways located in Woodbury. Our learning community serves students with similar learning profiles and or goals and supports for after their completion of transition services in the schools. We are looking forward to celebrating approximately 20 graduates later this month. We are proud of the fact that many of our students are graduating before their eligibility for special education services ends. This is a strong indicator of our students' determination and the effective work of our IEP teams. We're planning to begin the 24-25 school year with 89 to 93 students. The highlights of this school year that I'll be sharing with you tonight are our staff focus on high-impact instructional strategies, the expansion of the work experience team, and the special events that occur this month. For the second year, Next Step staff have collaborated with teaching and learning through professional development to bring AVID and CLRT strategies into our specialized instructional setting. This has resulted in the creation of unique learning supports designed to be most engaging for our students. For example, strategies and visual supports to increase and encourage academic language have been modified to best support our students. Marking the text protocols have been differentiated to be most appropriate for our instructional topics and our learners. Last month, I was joined by Molly Lester and our instructional coach to conduct AVID walkthroughs. It was very encouraging and affirming to see how many high-impact instructional strategies are observed during a well-developed instructional session in special education settings. This year, we expanded our work experience team. Employment is a key focus in our programming for students. Not only do outcomes in employment impact our students' ability to support themselves, contribute to their families and community, and use their unique skills and abilities in their daily lives, but employment provides the greatest opportunity for integrated experiences outside of settings that serve primarily individuals with disabilities. Our work experience team provides classroom skill building for the behaviors and knowledge needed for successful employment. They develop and support school-based and community-based employment experiences and connect with and collaborate with employers in the community to create opportunities for students. Approximately 80% of our students in both learning communities had community employment experiences within their weekly school schedules this trimester. In June of 2023, MDE extended the age of eligibility for special education services to students' 22nd birthday. This change can result in up to an additional school year of eligibility for some students based on their birth date. As a staff, we feel strongly that this additional time can have the biggest impact on student outcomes in the area of employment. This growth in our work experience team allows us to strengthen our focus in this area, as well as strengthen our community and interagency partnerships. Here are the majority of our community employment partners that we worked with this year. This does not include the employers who employ our students with few or no direct supports of our school staff. For the last highlight, I want to share the May events that staff and students have been preparing for and participating in. On May 2nd, we welcome many of the students and families who will be joining us in the fall. For this event, some of our current students served as tour guides and hosts, and it was fun to hear them tell their stories and share their experiences with incoming students. On May 22nd, the Special Education Resource Fair will be held at Eastridge High School. This is a district-wide event, but there is a special focus on the transition ages of 14 to 22. Next Step staff are preparing a panel discussion focused on interagency partnership and planning during the transition years, and some of our students will be participating in the event in various ways. And on May 30th, we are celebrating our graduates in our school year at Oltman Middle School, and thank you to those of you who plan to attend. It's a very special event. And now time for questions.
Anyone have any questions?
I have two questions. The first one is, what does CLRT stand for?
Culturally and linguistically responsive teaching.
Okay. And the other one is their birthdays. Do they go to the end of the year, or do they graduate on their birthday?
The day before their birthday. So happy birthday. So next year will be the first time we experience that rolling age out.
Okay, so then at the end of the year when you have your graduation ceremony, do they come back, or?
Yeah, it's a good question. We haven't quite figured that out yet. It has been common that we've had students take their diploma based on their IEP progress, maybe 5 to 6 a year, and then we've celebrated them in May. This is going to be more, so I think we're kind of figuring that out. So,
you had mentioned that of the roughly 20 students who are graduating this year, some of them are graduating before their eligibility with the state, with state funding or state support ends. So can you talk a little bit more about what those students demonstrate that helps them or gets them out of our program before, sort of before the state says they have to be out?
yeah, so it's based on goal progress and kind of what's all around them. So we have this really great pleasure of having like multiple partners at the table. So during the time that students work with us, they may start to work with an organization like Vocational Rehab Services, VRS. County supports might be something that students benefit from based on their unique individual profile. Those that agency comes to the table in a little bit different way. And then based on how those agencies are working with and for the student, and then again, their own self-determination, the way that they kind of dig into their goal progress, the team just gets to that space of saying, we see what the next step is, we see that you're ready and prepared for it, we see that we have this data that says this next year looks like it's going to be really successful and you're on your way, and we get to make that great decision that it's time to issue the diploma.
So when students leave Next Step and Pathways, then is there other support available to them? You mentioned the county, but are there other, or are you just kind of like, okay, you're 22, see you later?
We hope that doesn't feel that way really ever. So it's very individualized. Just really based on, again, what they may be eligible for, if they're eligible to benefit from supports through county services. VRS is a vocational rehab services is a voluntary agency that students may or may not opt to work with. We really hope that it doesn't just feel like school services are done. School services are exceptional. We do very, very good work. I understand for many families, many experiences, ending that service feels very different. It's a different kind of service provision than other agencies versus the school, but we really hope we have a warm handoff. We have a good idea of what that next agency is going to look like. We hope that if they take their diploma on a Friday, we know what Monday looks like. So.
And then you had mentioned 80% of students have employment experience. So is that like a typical number that have employment experience in any given year, or does that really fluctuate? Or maybe what would we ever have 100% student employment?
So, and that's in the community, which we're very proud of. And so that takes, it takes logistics and people, and it's very different to provide instructional support in the community than it is in the classroom. The staff-to-student ratio goes down significantly. To really build it up to be meaningful, it takes a lot of planning and development. So we're really proud of that. To have 80% of our students over the course of the week have experiences in the community based on employment is something we're really proud of. And again, that's come because last year we had 1 job coach, this year we have 5. We have 2 additional vans, we have an additional work, so all of that comes because we've added this great staff. So in special education, it's the 100%. We want to see 100% of our students making progress, but we also know that it's such individualized programming that it might not be appropriate for 100% of our students to have in a week a community-based employment experience. So that's always a little...
No, that's what I was wondering. And I mean, I agree. I think 80% is fantastic. How do the community employers... like, are they all longstanding employers and they all know how to work with our students, or how does it work when they're getting their work experience and we're still providing the educational experience?
Yeah, many of them are new. It takes time, relationship, and well-developed parameters around partnerships. So work-based learning has those things in place. So the parents, the student, the employer, and the school know what their part is. And then it really comes down to telling good stories. And so the more employers that we have up there, the more likely that we're going to have more employers, right? Good begets good. Those stories just get really contagious. And we come by them all different ways. So Northern Tool and Woodbury, there's a person who oversees Project Search in White Bear Lake. Her husband was the manager of that Northern Tool and was like, you need to connect with Nikki, you need to get students in, and they're a fabulous partner for us. So that's just kind of because people are connected to the work. Our work coordinators do a great job of building relationship. It takes time to do that. And then in terms of that accommodation specialist, right, so when our students come into work in these spaces, so right as an exploration. We're learning about them, they're learning about themselves, and then we have the special education teacher and the job coaches who can come and think about a job in a different way, maybe universal design, maybe it's something we know has worked in the classroom or the school-based setting. Let's see if that works in the work setting. Again, because then we're telling the story, we're building this understanding of that individual in that employment setting. So when we talk about that handoff to voc rehab, or we talk about that handoff to that next community agency, we have a lot to share because of these experiences. So again, they take time, they take intention, they take dependability, and again, really great employers to say yes to these experiences.
Thank you.
The question for you: with an IEP, does that not trigger automatically the student to have a resource person or a social worker, and then triggers when they get closer to graduation a social worker from the county? Doesn't that trigger that?
An IEP does not necessarily mean that they will be eligible for long-term county supports.
Well, are you familiar with RISE? You work. Okay, I worked with them, and they are a wonderful resource. And I didn't know that they worked with you all or not.
They'll be at our resource fair.
Okay.
Excited
good.
to have them there. And I know that our work coordinators are part of something called the Washington County Transition Interagency Committee.
Yeah.
And RISE has been, year after year, a very consistent partner in that space.
Strong advocates, yes.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. Can you expand on what culturally and linguistically responsive teaching is and
Yeah.
provide some examples of it in practice?
Sure.
Thank you.
So, and that was one thing that was really eye-opening to me and really fun with these Avid walkthroughs. So, in one of the spaces, so really it's about making sure that our instructional spaces are familiar and represent our students, right? They see themselves in our instructional spaces, and those instructional spaces become unique to that group of students in that space, right? That learning community. One thing that I should have probably recognized working in special education, but it took Molly Lester to say to me, like, this is so linguistically responsive, was when we were in one of our programs where students use augmentative and alternative communication devices. And every time our teachers interacted with that device, they were providing linguistically responsive instruction because that was the student's mode of communication. And I just had not thought of that before, and it was just really so lovely and affirming. So.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to 4.2, and that is our middle school construction update, and that will be presented by Tyrone Brookins, Assistant Superintendent.
Right, good evening, everyone. The next item is a construction update focusing on our middle school projects. The presentation will cover the guiding principles for each project, along with the design criteria. We'll also include floor plans, classroom layouts, and some rendering. We have in attendance this evening our middle school principals, Joni Hagebach and Carrie Lopez. They're at the table. With our architects, Sal Bagley from Wold and Mark Dubois from Coma. And then we also have in attendance this evening Shane Butler, who is our Cross Anderson Senior Project Manager. And at this time, I will turn your attention to the presentation.
Testing. All right. Thank you so much for having us. Maybe we should do introductions quick. So I'm Sal with Wold Architects and Engineers.
Carrie Lopez, Principal at Woodbury Middle School.
Joni Hagebach, Principal at Oltman.
Mark Dubois, Coma, Architect.
And Shane Butler with Krause Anderson.
So we're excited to bring you some updates about each of these projects. We'll kind of go building by building, and I'd be happy to take questions or comments all along the way if we want to stop and pause. First up is Woodbury Middle School. So as a reminder, everyone, the referendum project scope included kind of 4 key points. First one is relocation of the main office to create that secure entry sequence that the district is really seeking to have at all of its facilities. Second topic would be renovation of the former pool into educational space. The third would be renovation of the existing music suite, including creating a third music room. And last but not least, creation of a bus road on the site to try to address some of the traffic problems. So we'll show you what each one of those things is looking like and how we got to the solution drawing that we have. So we had an advisory committee that included staff, teachers, and administration from the building that met 3 times in February and March. You can see the dates listed here. If anyone's interested of who was on that, I'm sure Carrie could review it, but they really spent a lot of time talking about what's important from a student, staff perspective around visitor entry sequence, how can we best support security, but also day-to-day operations. Talked about its space relationships, even down to, for example, how many people should a conference room hold? And so all of that discussion was documented and informed the solution. Then after that group really landed what I would call a floor plan, then we went into what we call user group meetings. And so we had a round of meetings on April 3rd as well as April 18th. And that's where, let's take the main office, for example. We look at just the main office and what direction do doors swings and where are the light switches and where are our marker boards and is there glass in that door? And so getting down to a lot of that level of detail. This is a graphic of some of those guiding principles and design criteria I mentioned to you. So these are the written statements, kind of the rules of the design that committee helps us come up with. Some key points from this project was, of course, to be consistent with district security and safety standards. Of course, we wanted to have that third music room, and the goal was to have it in proximate locations so that they can operate as a department. And then to have a multi-purpose lens in the conversion of the former pool to make sure that it could support physical education. So here's an overall floor plan of the main level of Woodbury Middle School, and then each of the main scope items are color-coded. So you can see the green color shows moving that main office to the main entry so that we can have a secure main entry sequence. Pre-referendum, this had been pondered that potentially an addition would be needed, but I think a win of the design has been that we've been able to work with Carrie and her team on scheduling to make sure that we can actually have the main office use the first 2 classrooms that are directly adjacent to that main entry to move the main office, and then through kind of a domino effect, no loss of classrooms, actually not have to build an addition. As everyone who's familiar with the site is well aware, there's not really a lot of space or parking, and so kind of any loss of stacking space or parking would be a detriment to the school function. So this was a win for the project. We will zoom in on that soon. Then the blue color reflects some renovations to create that kind of appropriately located 3 meaningful size music spaces that are designed for band, choir, and orchestra, along with practice space, storage space, office space, things of that nature. And then last but not least, the conversion of the former pool into that multi-purpose space. So then we have some graphics, what each one of those scope items is looking like. We'll talk about schedule towards the end of the building update, but we've gone through what we call schematic design, so that's really getting all of the important space relationships determined and a floor plan. And we're just now moving into the kind of third dimension of what are things going to look like and feel like now that we're in design development. So the left-hand side represents where we ended at schematic design, and that's what we call a bubble diagram. And so that's all of the rooms, for example, of the main office to scale, color-coded by function, so that we could talk through with the advisory committee important relationships. So I'll make a couple of points there. You can see we've got the secure vestibule directly attached to the reception space. For those who are familiar with, for example, the space relationships at Altman Middle School was a major inspiration here. So you would come into that reception area. Then there are a few spaces that are located to be easy for visitors. So one of those purple little boxes is a visitor bathroom. And then to the north of that would be a conference room. So if a parent, for example, is coming for a meeting, that's very easy for them to get to without going further into the school. Then to the right of that, we've got the nurse area or the health office located. So there's an office, the cot room, space for treatments, medications, storage, and then the other purple box would be the nurse's bathroom. So that's directly to the right or to the east. And then to the north or up would be the administration. So we've got space for 4 offices, as well as another small conference room, kind of last but not least, the workroom. So staff can get to mailboxes and reception can stack the mailboxes and have extra copies. The graphic on the right is really all of those same space relationships in 3D. So this is what's called an axon drawing. It's like the ceiling is peeled off and we're looking down into it. The furniture will be a future discussion, but we do like to show furniture in drawings like this because it gives scale to the space. It's hard to know how many people fit in a room without showing anything. None of the furniture is finalized by any means, but we talked about how big should an office be and how many people need to fit, how many side chairs might you have, would you have a bookshelf, would you have a filing cabinet, and that all helps make sure that the space is appropriately laid out. So here you can see the first pass at how we think that might be arranged. The outside wall is the kind of the left angled wall. So you can see it goes secure vestibule into that main reception area, then the conference room. Right now it's shown that the 2 assistant principals would be in the next 2 offices, and then the principal and dean on the end, along with a small conference space, some space for secure storage, things like the vault or safe. And then on the right-hand side of that L-shaped volume, again, is that nurses or health office suite. One of the great things about the building or about this design is that we're going to be able to not lose that lobby space by doing this. It's really just shifting. So to the right, you can see there's that large gathering space with a suggestion of some flexible furniture. That's where the main office is today, for example. So we're really kind of taking and flopping those 2 functions so that you have the right relationships. Here's a bubble diagram of the layout of the music suite. This is a good example of our work not yet being done. So we've met with this group twice now, I believe, and we have a third meeting on the books to try to get it right. When we talk music, we are starting to talk about like actually how many flutes, actually how many violins, and so getting some of those details and the storage can be finicky. Important details though. So you can see here the two existing rooms are shown on the left, the choir and band. Being renovated for accessibility improvements and some consolidation of space. So we've got a centralized music storage in the center of them, along with an office on the outside wall. And then on the right-hand side is the creation of the third music room that is currently labeled orchestra, along with a practice room and office. And then there's some rearrangement to that part of the building to not lose a couple of functions that are there today, including some outdoor storage and gym storage. So then here's axon views of those music spaces. You can see the suggestion of how the rooms might be used in either radial chair layouts when it comes to band and orchestra, or portable or movable risers when it comes to choir. Starting to show some level of detail around cabinetry, like I said, for instruments, things like that. And then the multi-purpose is a space that we spent probably the most time in the advisory committee talking about how that could best meet a variety of educational needs. So the solution at this time that the group is recommending is to fill in the pool, but then have a floor, a multi-purpose floor on, I would call it pool deck level if you're imagining the space. And so that would allow a larger volume space to support a whole bunch of different things. We've talked about that it could be another PE station that's less designed around team sports like basketball and volleyball, and more around some of the more traditional, non-traditional movement options. Do you have any other examples of things?
Like with ping pong, that they were talking about the ping pong. They could do pickleball. They could do volleyball in there. Just not basketball. There won't be basketball hoops, if that helps on that. And then just a lot of life skill games that they can use the room for.
It'll also be a nice presentation space. We actually just met yesterday to start talking about technology or projection needs in the space. So on the left-hand side is a bubble diagram, and then on the right-hand side is an axon. We've started talking about also things like where might marker boards be, and we do have to provide a ramp down into the space to reconcile the level changes, getting down to pool deck level, so that's what you see. Those lots of vertical little lines are the pickets on the ramp. And then I saw some smiles when I mentioned this on the scope slide. So we have been working with the City of Woodbury to try to do what can be done to improve traffic on your site that just does not have a lot of access opportunities. And so what we're currently working on with them that they are giving us the green light on is what I'll call it. We haven't gone through official submittal processes yet, but we've had several meetings and do have it in writing from them that they're in support of this idea, would be to have middle school buses be able to come and go from that hatched white road. So there would be another curb cut out onto the street so that that traffic form does not have to fight through elementary traffic and parent traffic to get down to the bus loop and back. So that is how the middle school buses will get down into that bus loop on the south. There will be some modifications needed down there to get bus turning radiuses and things like that to work out. But that will remove one of the forms of traffic off of that very heavily used western portion of the site. To do this, we will have to reconstruct some of the play fields that are there today just to get the road properly aligned. So you can see that multi-purpose and that softball diamond will essentially get reconstructed through that process. Correct. Correct.
She knows.
Are going to be as well?
Yeah, and we might have to do some traffic control measures to try to discourage parents from taking that as a cheater way in or out, whether that's signage or curbing or what have you. Might another layer probably needed, but we'll have to think through that rushed parent mentality and make sure that's not an easy way to circumvent. Maybe just for some context, so we've been in design from January till now, and we are proposed to finish construction documents in September. We are trying to get all of our input before staff leave for the summer. Then the schedule thus far shows bidding this fall, and then construction happening in phases from fall of 25 to summer of 26. There's parts of the project that really need to happen during the summer, like the main office relocation, because it's impactful renovation at a very important door. And then there's other parts of the project, like the conversion of the former pool, that might be a great way to take advantage of non-summer construction pricing, right? It's not something that you have to do as a summer slam. So we do not have a final phasing plan to show you tonight, but that's the mentality that we've been operating under. Be happy to stop and take other Woodbury questions or comments, or if there's anything you'd want to add.
Thank you. All right. What is the space that's being taken for the new orchestra room? You said it's currently storage?
Yep. So the new orchestra room will be, it's an outside, on the current one that we're proposing, they'll have, see the outdoor storage, so that's where the tractors are, the stuff for snow plowing. So they're moving it. It's over normally by the orchestra room. It was a wrestling room that was back when we were in junior high, so now we gained the multi-purpose room. So then wrestling will work from there. Otherwise, the outdoor and the gym space will all be there. So it's really taking the wrestling room, that area, and we'll move that into the multi-purpose room.
There's no expansion of the footprint of the school?
Yeah, that's what's beautiful, because it can work within that. And some of you might be wondering, and the comment about how are we soaking in the 2 classrooms, because I'm a big school, 1,140 I think I have for next year. So currently, if we could back up to the overall, keep going, the other way, sorry. That one. If you see the choir room, the blue on the left, the room next to it is a regular classroom, and that's been my orchestra room. So if you take that room away, then down my D wing that doesn't have anything, it's heading down this way, not where the red is, but on the other side, I have an extra band teacher down there and an orchestra teacher. Now within the space that we're creating, all those teachers will be in those spaces, so I'll gain 3 classrooms back. So I'll gain the 2 plus 1, just for clarification about that.
Any other questions or comments about Woodbury Middle? All right, otherwise I'll keep going and talk about Oltman before we move on to the other 2 buildings. So as a reminder of project scope at Oltman Middle School from the bond referendum, the big project there is to, in addition to create capacity for about another 400 students. That includes a couple of STEM classrooms, a multi-purpose classroom, 3 science classrooms, 9 general classrooms, 2 medium group rooms, and then some flex, or that pod space that Oltman is really known for. It's designed as a hallmark of. Then we've got expansion of the kitchen and cafeteria to support those additional students, which was, and all of this was master planned, right? So we're really executing the district's master plan. One caveat for this project, or a unique thing that we have to keep in mind, is that there is a change to the state building code that was adopted in May of 2020 that requires school building projects of a certain scale to include a tornado shelter, a storm shelter that can hold all of the staff and students in the event of a tornado. And so that's what that looks like, is really hardened construction, right? So where you might have normally a steel roof, you might have a concrete roof. And we have to be careful and planful around openings and windows. You can have those things, but there's certain products that can really meet those requirements. So that's just been something we've had to keep in mind as we go throughout the design. This will not be the only project from the bond referendum that would have to comply with this. So it's just the first one out the gate. All right, so when I talked to you about the idea behind the advisory committee meetings, we had a great group at Oltman that met 5 times in January, February, and March to land the layout and talk about important space relationships. Spent a lot of time talking about, what of the existing design do we love and want to make sure not to lose, and how to replicate versus, what could or should be different about this design. One of the things that came out of that was the idea of locating the 2 STEM rooms and 3 science rooms together in a pod so that they really got to access that pod space the way that a lot of the rest of the instructors get to. And so that's a change, whereas the general classrooms you'll see in the design are oriented very similarly to the way the pods or houses are arranged today. Then we've had those more detailed meetings, 2 rounds now. We had them on April 10th and April 24th. So for example, we would meet with some science teachers to talk about the exact design of the science rooms down to the design of the casework. How high are the counters? How many drawers? How wide are they? How deep are they? Are they lockable, right? So there's a lot to talk about to get the details of some of these spaces right. We also spent a lot of time with this group setting these guiding principles and design criteria. I pulled out some key points from the discussions. So the group decided that the additions should look and feel like they match the rest of the building, as opposed to going in a different direction with the architecture and interior design, so wanted a holistic end product. That the pod layout will vary from the existing updated learning communities, and that we should find additional opportunities for that flexible learning, like I mentioned, the STEM and science area. So here's an overall floor plan of Altman that shows a little bit of the site as well. So it's a large project, but it's kind of 2 bullet points of scope. So you can see in that tan color, we've got the cafeteria, kitchen, servery expansion. We've had, I think, 3 or 4 meetings on the design of that space, and I think we'll probably have a couple more before it's all said and done. Optimizing, I would say, the back of house kitchen, food prep, serving, and what to do with dishes, so getting all those space relationships right. Then in blue, there is a 2-story classroom addition that includes all those spaces I listed off before. It is more space on the first level than the second level. On the south side is all of the general classrooms, and then on the north side is that science and STEM pod, as well as the multi-purpose. Here are zoom-ins to that classroom addition on both levels you can see here. So I'll start on the left image on the top. You can see we've got those 3 science rooms and 2 STEM rooms all co-located around some space in front of them to operate as pod space for them. The gray spaces between rooms reflect shared storage environments for those instructors. So some things would be in the classroom, some would be in a shared storage room, kind of depending on the item. Also in that area, you can see that light gray color reflects some bathrooms. And then we've also got a staircase to the upstairs. And that northern part of the plan, where the science and STEM are, will actually function as the storm shelter. So you can see there's some black lines going across the hallway. So there are actually shutters that would be in the ceiling that would come down in the event of a tornado. And so that's the hardened area that everybody would go to. Directly above that, we've got the multi-purpose room, which, just because I've got Carrie here, if you imagine like the den at Woodbury Middle, it's a very similarly designed space, right? A larger space, could do team teaching, large meetings, what have you. In that blue color, and then right next to that is the mechanical room, electrical room, things like that. Then on the then there's the main hallway, which will include the bus entry and exit. So that will go to the same spot that buses are today, but we just had to move the doors further out. And then on the south side, you are probably recognizing the pod layout as being very similar to what they have today. It's kind of a mirror of the pod to the right of it. So we've got 5 general classrooms on the first level, along with a conference room and a medium group room. And then upstairs, we've got 4 general classrooms, along with those same 2 assets. Here's another one of those axon drawings of the science and STEM area. So you can start to see, again, furniture not determined yet, but we've started to show design of storage for these spaces. It's particularly important. How many sinks has been a big discussion. What should the flooring material be? So some of those are shown here. Where are doors? Where are windows for supervision of students who might be out in the pod space so that the instructor inside the room can see them? Obviously, that's a big part of the design at Altman. And then you can start to see those bathrooms that are in the center. Here's one of those drawings of the classroom pod. This happens to be the first level. The second floor would be incredibly similar, just with the omission of the room that's at the bottom of the screen. So you can see here we've got these 5 classrooms around this shared pod environment. In the bottom left corner would be that medium group room. That's for more special education or intervention services. Designed really to be flexible so that Joni and her team can schedule things as needed. And then kind of a new asset that the design will include is a conference room on each level. So kind of at the top center of that pod space with entrances on either side is a conference room. A couple other details I didn't talk about, I guess, on the first slide would be that we are adding more lockers to accommodate these students. So those are intended to be in kind of a locker bank or a locker bay directly outside the pod space. So you start to see that's what some of those little volumes on the top are. And just some early 3D views. So as the advisory group told us, they really want this to feel like it was always here and always a part of the plan. And so it will be our intent to have the architecture feel like an extension of what's already there. So working to try to match metal panel color and brick color and tint of glass and things like that. So working on getting samples. And then last, but I think I have one more. So then here's I thought they might make more sense together. So here's a floor plan of the kitchen cafeteria at Oldman on the left, and then early rendering on the right. So I'll start on the floor plan. We've been talking about how to have the kitchen and servery best serve this number of students or best address their needs. So that might include some more prep space, storage space, and serving space, right? So you can see that there's an extension proposed for all of those. The dark black lines on the left would be the existing wall moving out a few feet to accommodate that extension. And then the gray lines in the center of the servery, for example, reflect where the wall is today. Then the lavender color would show the cafeteria expansion. So the dash line that goes through that space is actually where the glass is today. So you can see how much the wall is proposed to move out to accommodate that additional seating capacity per lunch period. Again, furniture to be determined, but showing a layout just to prove that we could serve the number of students that's been discussed. And then a couple of flow and function things that we've been working on is adding a vestibule to that northern set of doors to make that easier to come and go from and really to be kind of a true after-hours entrance. Schedule-wise, we are on actually a very similar schedule for this project to Woodbury Middle School. It's a little bit larger project, so it goes more towards the end of September with bidding again in the fall. And then construction on this is proposed to start next spring with obviously getting in the ground after the ground warms up enough to do footings and foundations. So those additions would be starting in the spring, I think with the exception of the cafeteria.
Correct. We plan to start the cafeteria addition in June after school's out.
Yeah, just because it's a little bit more impactful to operations. And it's presently slated to go through summer of 26. Obviously, there's a moment in which we have to tie new and old together. And so we do need a summer's worth of renovation to do that well. So I'd love to take comments, questions, anything Joni felt I missed she'd want to highlight.
I think one of the things that we added in was that additional entrance too at the other end of the building.
Mm-hmm.
So we added that one in. And also in our new pods, having 2 of our classrooms have a wall that can be opened so that you could have a larger space. Again, we really looked at the functionality to be able to say we're going to have a larger group in here, and so providing multiple purposes for a couple of those classrooms.
Exactly.
We're really excited not to have to fly drones like right down the middle of the hallway and race cars down the middle of the main hallway as well for STEM. So that's a highlight.
Can I just ask a question logistically about how your building is set up now? So in each of are the pods like set up as, you know, this is like one of the 7th grade teams, this other pod is one of the 6th grade teams? Because I think that's how Woodbury was set up, right?
Right now we are, so we've got 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. We have spillover from 8th grade into 6th grade. That's just been the function of it. So it's not really designed to be only for one. Our intention is we know that we're not going to have the kids don't come in perfect grade level, quantities. So we know that we're going to have some spillover and some mobility there. We're not going to be taking 9th graders, if that's what you're asking.
And then the STEM spaces, that's for that 8th grade STEM class, right? The opposite of required electives. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So and actually STEM is part of our wheel, so it's one of our trimester classes, and so we have our students going through there. There's a lot of building and a lot of design, and So it was really nice to have the STEM teachers talking about how one space could be used as a designing space, the other classroom could be used as a build space, and there could be some flow back and forth between. They were really intentional about their comments there. The cafeteria too.
Oh, please.
So one of the things that we were thinking, you saw the drop down, the change in the elevation there, and some of the conversation around that was maybe to create a space that was not quite as big and as expansive, thinking that some of our students, particularly those with some sensory needs, we want to include them, but that would give an opportunity to kind of create a separate space, a little bit more comfortable. I don't know what the right words are, that we could do some things acoustically with the space and even with furniture. Just to give it a little separation, because right now it really is a pretty, even with some exceptional sound panels in the ceiling, it still is pretty overwhelming for a lot of our students to be in there. So to be able to provide some of these extra spaces in a lower ceiling is going to be helpful.
And sorry, one more question, Sal. Like, so this is the only building that needs that reinforcement, because since we're not adding space to Woodbury, they don't need to have the reinforcement done there?
Correct, yep. So projects that will be impacted by this include anytime you're adding enough space to hold more than 50 occupants as measured by the fire code. So you get to 50 occupants pretty quick, like 2 classrooms would trigger it, but renovation projects do not. So we will not be doing one at Woodbury Middle. We will be doing one at Oltman, and there will be several other referendum projects that will have to comply with that. So.
Our team's charge, one of the charges, is to work with Cottage Grove and Lake as a combined project. Obviously, you know, the buildings are very similar in architecture, not exactly, and some of the interior functions and programs are different, and I'll get to that in a moment. Based on the overall referendum project schedule, our team has been focusing more on Park High School and Eastridge High School, and have only just started to touch these 2 middle schools. So I won't be able to show all of the great diagrams and floor plans that Sal had on her projects. We have started the process. We're about a month in. We've started to meet. We met individually and separately with the Lake team and with the Cottage Grove team. And then after that first meeting, we decided we would combine meetings moving forward. Again, the 2 main goals, a fairly simple approach and scope at these buildings, is to create a new addition off the existing front entry that would create a more secure entry sequence and administration all in one area that's secure before you get into the building. That's one of the deficiencies of the current at both buildings that certainly needs to be addressed. Also, there will be some interior renovation of some of the spaces that are vacated by moving out into the new addition. We'll get a little more into that. So again, we've met, and one of the main goals that we've landed on is that the additions at both schools would be nearly identical. Obviously, as I mentioned, the architecture and the sequence of the spaces is almost identical at both buildings, so it makes sense to have one very similar addition. When we get to the interior spaces, there's more freedom. The 2 groups have talked about the variances within their existing programs. Lake Middle School has a desire to bring some of the special ed services and staff together, whereas Cottage Grove already has sort of a hub or a centralized location for special ed, so they're going to treat the interior existing main office space differently. Again, none of this has been set in stone. We've only been meeting in early April and early May. We've had 3 meetings to date. Within the addition itself, again, the main goal is to create sort of a security sequence, I'll call it. First, a secure vestibule that allows anybody to come into. Then sort of the second layer is a secure main office, which people can be visitors or outside people coming in can be let into, but they still are not allowed into the rest of the school or even into the administrative portion. So there's sort of two layers, and then once that person or people are cleared, let's say, they can move either into the administrative side, the health office, or back into the school if they have needs to go back. So we're designing this front entry addition to house administrative staff, health staff, and because we haven't gotten our way all the way through these leadership and user group meetings, some of the other functions haven't been fully nailed down, and that's partly why I'm not going to show a floor plan per se, because some of those pieces are still being put together in the puzzle. As I mentioned, we had some separate meetings up front, separating the two schools to kind of get individual perspectives, and then once we got that information from their leadership teams, we combined together and have been meeting as a group. Our next gathering will be in a week or so. Again, diagrammatically, aerial photographs showing the existing facility and the proposed new additions. The footprint of those additions is not settled, but graphically, this is roughly about a 5,000 square foot addition that would come off the front entry. Sequencing and phasing of the construction, the plan is for construction to begin in the January of 2026, so that's partly why we haven't started the design process or gotten as far along as Sal's team has on her projects, because they're slated to be constructed later. Again, looking at the overall referendum project plan and phasing, and this is where Shane's team comes in to help organize the projects in a way that each one of them will hit the best bidding climates to be able to get the best construction bids and pricing, and so that not every project is stacked on top of each other, because there's only so many quality contractors that can do the work simultaneously. But nevertheless, the addition would be built first in the winter and the spring. So that would mean that the main entry would be moved to the back side of the building where the buses come in, and that, again, is part of the details that have to be worked out with the principals and the leadership team at each building. Then once school is out, the interior spaces would be renovated because the building would be empty, and then by the time school starts in the fall of 2026, everything would be completed and turned over for the school to use. Again, that's the schedule, that January 2026, so we will be putting together our construction drawings and bidding drawings this summer and fall to go out to bid in the winter, spring of 2025. Then there'll actually be a delay or a gap between the time the bids are taken and the contracts are awarded before the shovels start. Any questions about either one of those projects or sites?
All right, so our next steps, we will bring back to the table our high school group, and that meeting will take place in July. And then January 2025, design and planning work will begin for our elementary construction projects at the schools listed on the screen, which are Bailey, Crestview, Gray Cloud, Hillside, Pine Hill, Pullman, Red Rock, and Royal Oaks. And then all information is updated on our school's district's website, and that information is SoWashCo.org/construction.
Any other final questions? I have one, and it's about, now that we have to add, did we know when we went out that we had to add these tornadoes? So are they built into our, because it sounds like that could be pretty expensive when you're talking concrete versus.
I can answer that one. Yes, we did know about that when we were planning for the referendum, so those costs were built into the budgets for those projects, yes.
Okay, anyone else? Thank you, that was great. Okay, now we'll move on to 5.0, and that's our informational items. We do have one tonight, 5.1, and that's the first reading of our proposed policy changes, and that will be presented by Kristine Schaefer, Assistant Superintendent.
All right. The following policies have been revised to reflect updates to Minnesota statute, definition of terms, legal references, and cross-references. Board Policy Committee members reviewed the policies and made recommendations to administration, and our current policies are located online for our viewers, our community to view. So let's start with Policy 427, workload limits for certain special education teachers. One minor change on there to add the clarification of the role, and we're adding related service professional, meaning PT, speech, and OT. Policy 605, alternative programs, no proposed changes. Policy 607, organization of educational groupings. We updated legal references on the back, and then we just changed the language to early learning from childhood education. Policy 608.1, homebound hospital or day treatment instruction. We're proposing to remove this policy and create a procedure. This is not a model policy with MSBA. Policy 609, just a few grammatical changes from shall to will. Policy 612.1, development of parental involvement policies for Title I, no proposed changes. We have a stack here. 619, staff development for standards, no proposed changes, but we will renumber that to 425 to match MSBA. And then 625 grants, we are proposing to remove this policy and create a procedure through our finance department. This is not a model policy with MSBA. And that is it.
Any questions?
I got a question here. On 625 grants, so it says here, because grant applications and grant awardees obligate the district and the school board assumes authority to approve or deny applications. So if this policy is changed to a procedure and someone wants to offer our school district a grant and we're obligated to do something for that grant, should that not still have some purview on the school board? Do the other school board members think that maybe this is something we should have some more discussion about?
Yes, Ryan, thank you for bringing that up. Simi did bring that up during our committee meeting, and as part of the procedure, we are going to add a sentence on there that grants over $25,000 similar to this will be brought to the school board.
Okay, very good.
Yes, thank you for asking that.
Any other questions? Okay, and now we can have public comment, but there is none. So these will be brought back at our meeting later this month for the vote. Okay, 6.0 is reports and comments. Assistant Superintendent Kristine Schaefer.
All right, this week is Teacher Appreciation Week. Of course, we appreciate our teachers and our staff every single day, but we are doing some special things this week to celebrate them. So this week we're celebrating Teacher Appreciation Week, and we want to take a moment to extend our deepest gratitude to our staff for their commitment and dedication to our students and the profession of education. We celebrate not only our amazing teachers, but every member of our school community who supports the work of educating our students on the front line and as a support in our classrooms. From custodians to counselors, nutrition services staff to administrators, from paraprofessionals to bus drivers, from office staff to maintenance and every role on our team, each of you contributes to the culture and climate we create for our students and their learning. To all staff members, your contributions, big or small, matter and make us a strong team that we are. Thank you for everything that you do. So this week there's all kinds of fun things going on in our schools. Lots of food, lots of fun. Next Wednesday is our employee recognition banquet, and we will recognize staff retiring, staff getting years of service recipients, as well as District All-Stars. I know some of you are joining us, and that's always a fun night to celebrate with our staff. And lastly, it's a busy time of year. We have, I don't know who has a number of days left. I know all the teachers and staff do. I think it's less than 20. There's a lot of awards programs going on recognizing accomplishments of our students, and all 5 of our high schools and our Next Step program are busy planning their graduations, which I know some of you will be at. We will graduate approximately 1,800 students across all of our schools. Yep. And that is it. Thank you.
Okay, any board members have any events coming up for any committees that they would like to share? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to 7.0, future meeting dates. May 23rd is a school board business meeting here at the District Service Center at 6 p.m. Then June 6th will be another school board workshop meeting, also here at 6 p.m. That is 8.0, and we are adjourned.